What is good, people? It's Archery. Welcome back to my channel, and today I've got something special. I've got something special planned for all my people in the XPDLA, which is a league I play in. We have the Justice Division Power Rankings, which is our VGC division, and I am actually joined by a good friend of mine, Ryan. Say hi, dude.
Hey, what's going on? I am here to help with PRs. I have a lot of draft league experience, and I'm just here to kind of give some insight into what I think of these teams when I saw them. So that's how this is gonna fly.
Sweet, yeah. And Ryan plays with me in the MDL, and anybody who watches my MDL content knows that league is insane. So and Ryan's one of the top competitors. I don't mean to toot his horn or anything since he's here, and so. Anyways, let's just get right into it. So, there are 12 teams in this league, and this is basically just a little slide to show how we rank the teams. We ranked them on versatility, speed tiers, speed control, type synergies within their own team, the overall viability of the team, like whether or not the team meshes together, or if the mons are just good or the mons are just bad, and then the common weaknesses of the team. So,
Yeah.
So let's just get right into the first one. So I just want to start off by saying there's not one team that I don't like, but there are teams who are just overall a little worse than other teams. I think that's a good way to put it. So I'll start off with.
I tend to think of it this way. You can be a really fantastic player with a really bad draft and pull a lot of wins, or you can be a really bad player with a really great team and not win any games. This isn't about players. This is about composition of your team. Is how I like to put it.
That's a very good way to put it.
If I handed this to other people of varying skill levels, how well do I think they perform with it, given the tools that it has and the weaknesses and pros it has? So
very well put, Ryan. Very well put. So with that being said, let's just get right on to the first team. So this is number 12. We're going from bottom to top. So the pros of this team are okay. Look, so his team is Togekiss, Incineroar, Pheromosa, Hydreigon, Swampert, Klefki, Copperajah, Gmax, Toxicroak, Rotomo, and Seeking. So the pros of this team, I'm doing pros and cons for this. So it covers the Fire, Water, Grass, and Dragon Fairy Steel cores pretty nicely, I would say. The Togekiss and Incineroar is I think that's a really good support duo. You see that on the ladder a lot, and it's on the ladder for a reason. It's pretty good. So he's got good Dynamax options with Togekiss, Hydreigon, Swampert, and Copperajah. And I also thought that Klefki is a pretty good support mon for this for the top of the draft, at least, because some of the Dynamax mons that he has don't really they're kind of frailer, or they're on the frailer side. I mean, so the screens kind of help with that. And the cons for this team. So I feel like a couple of these picks on this team just don't really fit in, and they're kind of random in my eyes. Maybe they were just comfort picks of his, but for the comp they're a little bit random, and those picks are Pheromosa, Toxicroak, and Copperajah Gmax over regular. I think that the regular Gmax form, or the Dynamax form of Copperajah, is just a lot better than the Gmax form. So.
It's super significantly better.
Yeah, because you're missing out on the defense boost from Steel Spike versus getting a Steel Stealth Rock per se, and hazards are just non-existent.
Yeah, Copperajah's whole thing is it can Steel Spike for days.
Right. Yeah. So and then on the top of the draft, I really don't see a lot of type synergy when it comes to Togekiss, Incineroar, Pheromosa, Hydreigon. You're doubling down on the dark type there. And the top, there's no fairy switch in, really, if you think about it. So I also noticed that there's relatively no TR mode. Swampert is okay under Trick Room, and Copperajah is a good Trick Room sweeper, but as far as I can see, you don't have a setter, so you're kind of not giving the Copperajah enough of a push, I would say, by not having a sweeper. A setter. This team doesn't have a Tailwind option, right?
Nope, not a single mon gets Tailwind.
Yeah.
It just doesn't, because it can't match it, because it doesn't have anything that gets the move. Right, so that's an issue.
And then getting Tailwind set on you just kind of lose to it because you can't match it. One thing that we noticed is this team is extremely fake out weak. It just loses to fake out, I guess. Fake out plus max move just kind of destroys this entire team a little bit. So I wrote not a ton of viable firepower besides Hey Dragon, and what I mean by that is a lot of the firepower on this team comes from like Swampert, Caparaja, and maybe even Nasty Plot Road and Mo. Those mons just aren't really in the meta, I guess, for right now. I mean, Draft League is completely different from ladder, but there's a reason why some mons are just not used on ladder, and it's just because they're outclassed by other things. Not saying that these mons are bad per se, but they're lacking the firepower that was probably needed. And then you have no direction, or I'm sorry, no redirection besides Togekiss. And that's not necessarily a con, but the con about that is it takes away from Togekiss's offensive presence. You're kind of, if you want redirection, you're kind of forcing it to be a little bit more bulky, or if you're putting Follow Me on it, then it's not going to be as bulky if you want to run offense. It's just hard with this team. So Ryan, what do you think about this team?
Yeah, most of what you said there, I think, is pretty true to form. The no TR, no tailwind's a really big deal. You need speed control was the biggest thing I saw on this team that was lacking. Pheromosa's a mon I've seen do well in draft, but not very consistently. And I don't really think part of this team is I feel like the budgeting was a little off. Incineroar's, I'm sorry, it's not worth 18 points. Incineroar is a very good mon in the meta because it'll match up well against a lot of things in the meta. In Draft League, it is a lot easier to get good water types, good ground types in mid-low tiers that beat Incineroar quite well. Incineroar more so has use in a popular meta. It's still quite a good mon, but I don't know if it's worth 18 points to start your draft with. Similarly, Pheromosa is a great mon, potentially, but I find that it only ever works well in a late game scenario, which this team doesn't set itself up for super well. The Klefki is really good. I like Klefki, Togekiss, Incineroar as like a core. Toxicroak and Sea King are fine. I do think doubling down on fighting types was not necessarily the play. I think another type of fake out user would have been better than Toxicroak. Caparaja should just be the regular form. You're 100% right on that. The little extra chip you get from like the Stealth Rock is not worth the Steel Spike boosting, especially on a comp like this. Like if you face a Trick Room mode and you have that Caparaja giving defense boost to like an Incineroar or a Swampert that's out in this TR mode, that actually makes your ability to beat other TR teams a lot more viable in my eyes. But as it stands, you really can't handle those teams. And if someone has Tailwind and they can get it up before you, your whole team is outsped and you're really suffering for it. So I actually like the Rotom Mo quite a bit. I actually think it's one of my favorite picks on this team. It's got like good stuff on paper. It just feels less like a doubles team than it should in some areas. It just is missing some of those key roles that you really need in doubles to be successful.
Yep, I'm with you there. So yeah, with that being said, let's just move on to the next team. And the next team is the Zero Zoroarks, coached by Nixie89. And this team is Venusaur G-Max, Torkoal, Oranguru, Araquanid, Riolu, Braviary, Persian Alola, Magnezone, Palisand, and Selgor at the time of recording this. So Ryan, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, so the pros, first off, Venusaur. You can't, you spelled the coal with the actual word coal instead of
yes,
the K.
I
That's
did.
Funny. Venusaur is a fantastic weather mode. It's very solid in draft and solid on ladder. It is not as good in draft as I think it is on ladder, but it's still very good. Torkoal Oranguru is a great TR mode. Persian Alola is one of my favorite support options. I think it's great. And your speed control is pretty solid. We've got a really nice Trick Room mode. Braviary gets Tailwind, I believe. You got sun stuff. So actually, this team I think has some really good things going on around it. There are some issues though. Mainly the main cores are kind of exploitable. If your team is built well, you should be able to handle a sun mode. Paloa-Celigor will win you a game, but it's not going to win you much more than that usually. It's kind of a gimmick and people know what it is. And your Trick Room mode is good, but it relies on Oranguru. And Palisand, I believe, also gets Trick Room, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, I don't know. I'll have to look that up.
And like,
but regardless, those kind of mons are good at setting Trick Room, but they're not as consistent as you want them to be. They can get stopped with Taunt. They can get stomped. Both mons get stopped with Taunt. So if you don't run Mental Herb, you're screwed on that. And then if you're in Focus Sash, well, then you have the opposite problem. So essentially, your Trick Room mode is going to be consistent for a game, and then will be inconsistent the next game. And if your opponent calls it correctly the first time you set it, you're in trouble. There are a couple mons here that don't fit very well. I love Araquanid. It's actually super value on this tier list. It's a great mon. It doesn't really fit this comp super well. You're already flying weak from having Venu be one of your biggest things. That's going to come up. Riolu is amazing with coaching. Prankster coaching is really good. And it can proc weakness policies for days. The only thing it can proc a policy on is Zone and I guess Persian in theory. Which those aren't policy mons usually. Right. And you don't have anything physical other than the Araquanid to give the coaching boost to. And Araquanid only clicks Max Geyser. So like there's some issues there. The lack of firepower from a physical offense standpoint is actually one of the biggest things with this team. Outside of the Braviary and the Araquanid, you really don't have a lot on the physical side going for you. And the Sun is also only for the Venusaur. You don't have anything else to nicely complement that. And one thing about Sun that I've seen, I actually have seen it semi-recently. Sun TR works pretty well on the ladder a lot of the time, but it only works well in League. If you try to do TR and then your Sun's in back, then all of a sudden your really fast Venusaur is screwed. Right. So a lot of the time TR weather teams run into this in draft, where the kind of linear mode you can play in on ladder for a best of one doesn't work as well in draft. So you're going to have a hard time dealing with the fact that you have both TR and weather on the same top. That can be difficult to play around. With I think a really skilled hand, this team can do really well, but I do think a couple of transactions would really put this one over the top. This is a team with a lot of potential.
I agree. Just a couple points to kind of reiterate what you said. I love Araquanid. I think it's extremely good value. Problem is, it's on like
not on this comp.
Yeah, it's on like a Torkoal Venusaur team, and then on top of that, like when it maxes, okay, Max Flutterby is cool. What's his other max option? Max Geyser just wrecks the Torkoal and Venusaur's whole niche. So, and with Riolu, like I guess you could coaching Braviary and Araquanid, I guess, but like they're just better max options with the Venusaur and Palisand. And I forgot to mention that Persian is actually a form of speed control too, if you think about it, because it gets Quash, so and Icy Wind, I guess, right? There's a little bit of speed control there too. The one issue I have with this team is it's like I think you pretty much said it, like the amount of physical firepower. Like you got the Venusaur Torkoal, cool. I would have liked to seen another Sun Abuser. I think that picking regular Charizard would have been cool here, because if I'm not mistaken, I think that Charizard G-Max was gone. But
even just something like a Lilligant to after you the Torkoal, right, or a Vileplume to click Moonblast and Sludge Bomb and things like that. Just something different to kind of help support it. Vileplume maybe less so, because Venu and Vileplume have the same typing, but I mean they have a couple of different little niche differences.
Right. Absolutely.
More so something like Lilligant,
Yeah. So that's pretty much all about this team. So let's go right into the next one. This is these are the Victorian Vulpixes coached by P-Rex, and I'll take this one. So this one is Cinderace G-Max, Tapu Koko, Hawlucha, Amoonguss, regular Lapras, Noivern, Regigigas, Weezing, and Raichu. Now, I actually have some pretty strong feelings about this team. I actually think this team has a ton of potential, especially with the Koko, Raichu, Hawlucha. You're getting a electric terrain abuser, which is good, and you're also getting a mode for Hawlucha to come in and proc Unburden without even getting turn 1 passed. You know what I mean? So you can immediately proc the Hawlucha's Unburden, which is cool. You got the Amoonguss, which is good. Cinderace is great. You get Noivern for Tailwind. You also have an opportunity to proc the Hawlucha's weakness policy with Ishar Lapras, which is pretty cool. Considering that weakness policy on Burden, Hawlucha is just, oh my god, it gets calcs. Okay, it definitely gets calcs. So it's like that's like a lot of the common strength of this team. I think the terrain abuse is really cool. Um, I honestly think this team has, like I said before, it has a lot of potential, but it's got a lot of cons, and a lot of them are pretty big. If you guys look at the team, he has no TR mode, and that's not necessarily a con. It's just you kind of lose to Trick Room if you don't play it great. And he's always going fast, right? Because he has no mons that are really slow enough to go slow. So all of his mons are like mid to high speed tier, right? Except for like the Wheezing and Lappers like an Amoongus, but like those mons aren't gonna really be offensive enough to really make a difference. And then another big thing I have with this team is the Wheezing nerfs literally his entire team, and but besides Regigigas obviously, but it nerfs the entire team. And you could just bring the team without Wheezing, sure, but then without bringing the Wheezing and Regigigas, you're losing 29 points of your draft. And I think that's a huge chunk of a draft that could have been completely changed into something that could benefit from maybe the electric terrain, or maybe drafting a weather mode, or maybe some trick room options. Or I think I just think that the Wheezing is so bad on this team. It's not bad, but it's just not great for this comp. Another thing that I noticed is this team loses to Earthquake Rock Slide, which is a pretty common double move lead in VGC draft. Especially a lot of teams in this league have a lot of really solid ground types, or really solid fast mons who get Rock Slide Earthquake, or just Max Quake, Max Rockfall, and this team just does not want to switch in on it, like even the littlest bit. Another thing I have with this team is it's like hyper offense without like a lot of support. Your support is Amoongus, and it's like an unreliable, I wouldn't say completely unreliable, because only one Pokemon can carry safety goggles, but it is counterable with the safety goggles, so the redirection here isn't like as reliable as right. Yeah, it's a grass type too, yeah, of course. I forgot to include that in the cons. He actually does cover the Firewater Grass Core, and it's a pretty good Firewater Grass Core. Another thing with this team is it's like kind of top heavy, except for the Regigigas Wheezing, which is just, it's good on the ladder when you're not expecting it, but in draft, if you're going up against a really good player, they'll be able to counter it and try and figure out a way to beat that. So I think the Regigigas Wheezing is cool, but it's just not great on this comp. So, Brian, what do you think about this team?
Yeah, pretty much what you said. There's a couple other things that haven't been talked about yet. Amoongus is a pretty good support for this team on paper. The problem is that I do feel like you like Coco on this squad. And while I have seen people complain about electric terrain and sleep powder on some teams that didn't deserve it, cough, cough, Dan, in another league we do. On this team, I think is a lot more justified. Because one of the main reasons you want to spend 17 points on Amoongus is to spore. And you have a Surge Surfer Raichu and a Tapu Koko, and you can't spore with Amoongus in that situation. And not only that, but Tapu Koko likes redirection. And that means your Amoongus loses one of its major support roles. Obviously, you can lead Amoongus with Cinderace as well, or Amoongus Noivern, or whatever. Or throw it in next to Gigas after Wheezing dies inevitably. Yeah, I feel like the points were just kind of misplaced here. This team really needs a good Trick Room mode. I actually think the Tailwind's slightly redundant almost, just with how fast it can get. I mean, God. Burden Hawlucha and Raichu, Surge Surfer Raichu are insanely fast. And Cinderace can boost with Airstream, and is essentially a flying type.
Yeah.
So you can essentially, I mean, you're not hurting for speed. It's very rare for me to say I don't think this team needs Tailwind. I think that Gigas Wheezing is this is like one of the most, like, Regigigas Wheezing can work on, I've seen teams that aren't super ability reliant that have Gigas Wheezing that still underperform. And on a team like this that actually has every single mon with a notable and worthwhile and good ability they need to have active, it's really not that great. Because every single mon here, Libero, Electric Surge, Unburden, I mean, even on Lapras, Shell Armor, Water Absorb, Frisk on Noivern's insane in draft because you can just get item information super easily, super underrated. Yeah, it's just, it needs, this team, I feel like the problem is this team can't be ranked any lower because that top-heavy offense is insane.
Oh, absolutely,
Like,
yeah.
dealing with Cinderace, Coco, Lucha, like, is gonna be super hard. But outside of that, I don't see anything here that I really love. I feel like this team with some transactions will be insane, especially if that Trick Room mode gets expanded out a bit. But that's my current opinion on it. I think it's a good comp. It has some nice tools. It's just that I feel like it's missing that. I feel like there was some misplays with the points here. I feel like the Amoonguss is too overvalued for an electric terrain comp. I think the Gigas and Weezing are too overvalued, and you could have had like 4 other mons there that just really filled your team out and made it a whole lot better against what other people can bring.
Absolutely. One more thing that I really wanted to note is, excuse me, when you draft something, normally when you draft something, you're gonna be using it in different modes, or with different Pokemon, or you know, you're trying to get the most out of a Pokemon when it comes to versatility and move pool and lead matchups and flow charts and everything like that. And Weezing on this comp, I mean, like I said before, Regigigas Weezing is fine. Like, Weezing just nerfs everything on this comp, and I feel like I said that like a million times, but like, it's just, I think that the transaction that at least personally, I would love to see, I think Ryan would too, is dropping the Weezing Regigigas for more of a Trick Room mode. Maybe something that can benefit his top heavy draft in another mode. I don't know.
Yeah, this team would love a Prankster user too.
Absolutely,
even just something with Prankster would be awesome. Like a Sableye or something like that would be insane on a comp like this. But yeah.
All right.
So, let's move on.
Yep, let's move on. So the next one is the Long Island Landos, coached by Blitz, and this one, I really like this team actually. Whimsicott, Terrakion, Duraludon, Dracovish, Reuniclus, Kangaskhan, Charizard, Gmax, Luxray, and Scizor. So Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, the fast move's crazy good. You've got the Whimsicott, the Terrakion, the Dracovish, Zard. I mean, that's just insane. I think Luxray was very valued for 6 points. Reuniclus, you don't really have a Trick Room mode, but Reuniclus can operate as a Trick Room sweeper. It gives you some options. This team is held back by a few things. So everything has to have Whimsicott is too essential on this comp, essentially, is one of the problems. You're relying on Whimsicott for your beat up strat. You're relying on Whimsicott to set Tailwind for your Dracovish and for your Duraludon and for your Scizor, and you're relying on to set Sun for your Charizard. Meaning that if Whimsicott goes down, everything else doesn't work as well as it's supposed to, which is that's a major problem. Having a really good support mon like Whimsicott's great, and you complemented it well, but you needed another support mon or a weather setter or something to mitigate that, which we'll get to in a bit. No TR mode's bad, and this team does lose to TR. Reuniclus and Duraludon are really the only things that handle TR super well here. Also Luxray, I guess, and Scizor, but they don't. Outside of Reuniclus, you have trouble with it. Ice types do really well against this team. Just in general, you're going to have a hard time dealing with max ices. Outside of, well, you have Duraludon and you got the Scizor, which are good switch-ins, but more so max ice nerfs your potential weather setups with rain and sun and sand. It just gets rid of those options. So like max hailstorms are going to be very good against that team. There's not a lot of weakness policy procs on this team, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but they're just kind of lacking. This team would love a little bit of redirection. Not all teams need it. This team would quite like it. A redirector to help the Reuniclus out would be good, along with the Zard and the Scizor. Those mons all in particular would like a little bit. And Quake Slide's insane. Terrakion dies to Quake, Duraludon dies to Quake. Dracovish takes a good chunk. Zard is dead to the Rockfall. Luxray is dead to the Quake. Scizor doesn't take a lot of Quakes super long term if they're still on the special end. It's a good team with a lot of nice building blocks, pieces. However, I feel like you want a Sunsetter or a Sandsetter. If you're going to draft Dracovish and Charizard, you really want something like Gigalith or Hippowdon on this team. And I think there could have been more support than just the Whimsicott. It feels a little too heavily leaned into offense, which is something you don't say very often. But you've got a lot of really big, powerful hitters here that don't necessarily have all the support options to really let them shine to their fullest potential. I do think this team has a lot of good stuff on it. I think the best general mode for this team is going to be Terrakion Whimsicott with Dracovish in the back after Sans set, with maybe a LuxRay or a Scizor in the back there too. That's going to be the general best mode for this team, and it's going to roll a couple people. But outside of that, I don't 100% know how it's going to operate game to game. And I do like Kangaskhan for 10 points. Kang is pretty good in draft, and people sleep on it.
Yeah. You pretty much covered everything. I guess we're doing a pretty good job of that. So yeah, I think the only thing that I would do with this team is you don't really have a great Trick Room mode other than Reuniclus, obviously. So maybe I think Hippowdon would actually be a great transaction because it can operate under Trick Room. Not necessarily like the best Trick Room option, but it can operate under Trick Room. That would give you a little bit more offense under Trick Room, I think. It would give you the
Stream for the Dracovish.
Right, yeah. And also Terrakion benefits from that too.
Yep.
So yeah, that's pretty much it. Just everything runs through Whimsicott and no Trick Room. Those are pretty much the cons for this team. So moving on, we have the this team. Okay, we have the Pogging Porygons coached by OCFrey. And the team is Dragapult, Colossal, Urshifu, Rapid Strike, Cobalion, Sylveon, Registeel, Rillaboom, Jolteon, and Maractus. So, I'm kind of up in the air about this team a little bit. So I think this team actually has the best fast mode in the league. I think Dragapult, Colossal, Urshifu, Cobalion, Rillaboom, that is Jolteon, that is crazy. That is actually really, really good. It has insane Fire, Water, Grass, and Dragon Steel Fairy Cores. You can do weakness policy all around. You can do the beat up with Cobalion and Dragapult. Plenty of firepower. Plenty of really, really good Dynamax options. I think most of the Pokemon on this team want to Dynamax. So I think you have really good options here. There's some pretty big cons. So this team's pretty good, right? But we have it at 8 for a pretty couple big reasons. This team hard loses to Trick Room, hard loses to Trick Room. And by Trick Room, I mean Trick Room sweepers that have base 30 or 35 speed or below. He also has no Trick Room setter, and he has no way to consistently deny the Trick Room. So if a Trick Room team comes in here, it's gonna destroy, unless OCFrey completely outplays the opponent. I think this comp specifically just loses to Trick Room. And there are a couple of Trick Room teams in this league already. So this is a good ladder team. I think that the Dragapult, Colossal, Urshifu, Rillaboom was actually a core that Wolf Glick used in a tournament a couple tournaments back. Excuse me, and it actually had a lot of success. The problem is, your opponent is going to be preparing to beat that team on the ladder and in tournament. Everybody's building a team to try and beat the current meta, or trying to beat a large combination of mons. You can be a lot more precise in drafts, so ladder teams don't necessarily always work. And that being said, it's actually very predictable. You pretty much know what sets are coming on every single Pokemon, except for maybe Dragapult, or possibly something like maybe a support Sylveon set or something like that, or maybe a cool Registeel set. I don't really know, but everything else is always it's pretty much just one-dimensional. And I thought that was a pretty big flaw of this team. And another big flaw of this team is actually extremely fake out weak, just like another team before. This team, I mean, you have fake out with the Rillaboom and everything, but yeah, it's very, very fake out weak. And a lot of Pokemon on this team would really, really love redirection. Like Ryan said before, you don't necessarily need the redirection, but a lot of Pokemon on this team loves it. I think Dragapult plus redirection is just incredible versus a lot of teams. And if you find a situation where Dragapult wrecks an opponent's team, I think you're gonna be kind of regretting not drafting redirection, just because you can lead the Dragapult and just 4-0 game 1 or 4-0 game 2. I've done it in the past. I know a lot of people have done it in the past. It's extremely good. And the last flaw I have with this team is no real support option besides Dragapult. And Dragapult is a pretty good support option. I mean, it's fast, it gets screens, you can Willow, you can disable. You can do a lot of cool stuff with it. The problem with that is it takes away from its amazing offense. And there's actually somebody in another league that had the same criticism about it. They just didn't draft enough support to do the same things that Dragapult does, so that Dragapult's offensive presence is actually getting taken away from it. It's just kind of unfortunate with this team because there's a lot of mons in this team I really like. I really like the Cobalion Dragapult, the beat up shenanigans. I think that's really cool. And then on top of that, you can run the Sylveon Quick Attack with Pixelate to proc the Dragapult weakness policy. Same with Urshifu.
Yep.
You can do with a lot of things. So Ryan, what do you think about this team?
Yeah, a lot of the same stuff. The biggest thing is the Trick Room. I mean, God, it's really hard for this team to deal with a solid Trick Room. It's just gonna go through it. Registeel helps a little, and that's literally it. And Registeel isn't even that amazing in TR. It doesn't really need it. I do think the Pult lacking support is one of the biggest things that stuck out. You also have kind of a double down on fighting types in the top of the comp, which I don't really love. The Colossal Dragapult can do very well in draft, and everyone has to prep for it. However, that doesn't it's not a win button like it is on ladder sometimes. Like occasionally you'll be on ladder and you'll play a team and they'll be like, oh, okay, I lead Dragapult Colossal, and they just lose. You're not going to find that in draft very often if your opponent is prepping and playing smart.
Right, especially against really great players. So
yeah, the Cobalion and Registeel both being steel types. I like a double down of steel types a little bit more, but even still, Rillaboom's pretty good. I actually think it complements a lot of things on this comp pretty well, and provides a lot of needed offensive kind of revenge killing and support that this team kind of needs. So I think that was really good. And you didn't mention it, but Jolteon actually runs really good support sets with Eerie Impulse and Thunder Wave and Yawn and things like that. So that is weirdly the other support mon is right. Jolteon. But yeah, I do think this team is going to require you to run a more supportive Pult than perhaps you might want. Will this team get wins? Absolutely. If you don't prep for this fast mode, you're screwed. But even if you have a bad TR mode, like even if your TR mode's really not that great, just set TR in front of this team seriously. It also actually doesn't have Tailwind, and there's a couple of coaches with priority Tailwind in this league that will give this problems, and the speed isn't immediate. So while it's hard to outspeed Dragapult, if you have priority Tailwind or you have like something like Venu Cole where Venusaur outspeeds Dragapult, then this is all of a sudden trouble because your lead all of a sudden is very, very suspicious. So I do think that's actually a factor that should be mentioned as well.
Yeah, very good point. All right, let's move on. So the next coach is the Cambarian Charmanders, coached by AliceSabrina. I actually really like this team too. I know you like this too, Ryan. It's Grimmsnarl.
I like this team a lot.
Yeah, it's Grimmsnarl, Porygon 2, Latios, Torracat, Mudsdale, Slowbro, Galarian Form, Zapdos, Corviknight, Inteleon, Gmax, and Shiinotic. So go ahead.
Yeah, first off, just Porygon 2, Galarian, Slowbro, those are great TR setters. Very, very consistent. The speed tiers are pretty good across the board. It's a little mid-speed in some places, but in general, you've got stuff that can set Tailwind. You've got stuff that has Trick Room. You have things like the Torracat with the Fake Out. You got Grimmsnarl with Thunder Wave, Shenanigans. That's all really good. And the Dragonsteel Fairy Course, great. Grimmsnarl, that Grimmsnarl Corviknight Latios is really, really strong. That's really hard. That's a very nice defensive core that has a lot of switch-in opportunities and is very free. There are some cons though. TR mode's not actually as consistent as you want to because there's no redirection. Mostly because Porygon will always run Eviolite, so it can be taunted. And then Slowbro, if you lead with that, it gets... I don't know if Galar gets Oblivious, does it?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so you can also taunt that and or Fake It Out. So the lack of redirection actually hurts this TR mode slightly, which I think is one of the better modes on the team. The type synergy gets a little mediocre around the edges. The Dragonsteel Fairy Core is really good. However, there isn't really there's no Fire, Water, Grass core, and you have two flying types, and while they don't have the same weaknesses, that's worth mentioning that there will be some ice types that will give you some trouble. Oh wait, you do have a water type Inteleon. My bad. My bad. My bad. My bad. It's also your Mudspell proc. I won't spoil that too much. There is a big ice weakness. The Mudsdale and Zapdos are going to be, and the Latios are three of your biggest Dynamax threats, in my opinion. Those are the three mons I would expect to max the most, and they are all very weak to ice types. And a lot of your sweepers are reliant on the Trick Room getting up that you have, so your comp's going to be kind of in a weird position where you're either going to want to set Tailwind or get Airstream Boost off the bat and have your faster stuff with like your Grimmsnarl lead, or you're going to want to have your TR mode and just pray it goes up, which isn't going to be as consistent as you want it to be. I do think this is a very good team overall. I like almost everything it's doing. I think they were very smart with their point values. This is one of the very few teams where I feel like they didn't overreach for any point values, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like everything they have is pretty appropriately placed. I like where things laid out. I think it'll be a very solid team overall. But a couple of those cons I think will cost them against some of the teams that we have ranked a little bit higher.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this team has a lot of potential, and maybe, you know what, I don't necessarily think that this team needs transactions. I think this team can win a ton of games by itself. It's just we just have to see how the season goes out, and if AliceSabrina wants to make any transactions, I just hope that they're good ones, because this team has a lot of potential, and I hope you can take it all the way. So
yeah, this is one I think this is starting from here on. I feel like a lot of the teams won't need a ton of transactions.
Yeah.
This team sticks out as not needing a whole lot. The only thing is, and some of the top mons on this comp are, yes, they're ice weak, but I mean, it's Latios, Mudsdale, Zapdos. Like those aren't threats you want to just toss willy nilly off the comp. Right. You know, those are very powerful options, and you can mitigate that somewhat. So that's just my thoughts. I think this is going to do really well over the course of its season.
Yep, I think so too. So let's move on. Okay, so this team, I had a couple issues picking out cons, but I just think that like this is where the teams really start to show like the teams like at the top of this power ranking are going to be a lot more positive. I think they're going to have a lot less cons, but the cons are going to be a little bit more important because the draft is just so good. So let me try and explain what I mean by that. So the Pacific Slowbros, coached by Otto, Blastoise Gmax, Togetic, Snorlax Gmax, Dusknoir, Liepard, Gothitelle, Rhyperior, Silvally, Sceptile, Boltund, and Blaziken. So the first thing I noticed about this team is it's a very, very good balanced offensive draft. Blastoise, Snorlax, and Blaziken all benefit from redirection, and they're all extremely strong Dynamax options. One thing that I noticed, and this isn't necessarily a con, which so I put it under pro, is this actually lacks a dragon type, but you can actually bring in Silvally, and this is one thing that Silvally likes to do a lot. It covers any type weakness or any type disparity that you may be having, which is why it's a pro, and I think that Silvally was a great pick here. I love Silvally personally. Above average support options, and by above average I mean like they're really good. Like I love Liepard, I think it's really, really good, and for 11 points I think that's great value. Togetic in 10 points is also great value. Gothitelle in 15, I mean that's pretty expensive, but Gothitelle's a pretty good Trick Room setter with Fake Out and everything. And then on top of that, your Trick Room mode is amazing. Like you got 2 Trick Room setters, you got multiple sweepers in your Trick Room. I think the Trick Room mode here is really good, and the fast mode it's a little bit mediocre going into the cons, and most of this team is Trick Room reliant or taking advantage of Trick Room, or you know, it's a pretty slow draft for the most part, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, like I said. But if you're playing up against a coach who can really take advantage of slow mons and can deny Trick Room, you know, this team kind of struggles a little bit matchup wise. I don't necessarily know how Otto plays because he's a brand new player, but matchup wise it's kind of rough without Trick Room, unless you specifically go fast, which is kind of difficult with this team. But anyways, no Dragon Steel Fairy Core, which is kind of important, I think, in draft. You can always fix it with the Silvally kind of, but you're still missing some components to that core there. And then you have a below average Firewater Grass core, in my opinion. I think that Blastoise is a great mon. I think Blaziken is a great mon. And Sceptile is okay. I think it's decent value for 4. With the Sceptile though, before I go into the Firewater Grass core thing, it's basically an unburdened mon, so you don't really have much terrain at all to try and take advantage of that unburden. So you're looking to try and get some berries off, or maybe some weakness policy, or you're trying to get something set up with the Sceptile, and I just don't really see a lot of great options for that. Going back to the Firewater Grass core, it's a little bit below average, and by below average I mean normally with cores you really want some bulk on those mons to try and take advantage of the type synergy between the 3. And Blastoise is bulky in itself, but Blaziken and Sceptile aren't as bulky as you'd want them to be, so you're kind of losing out on that. The defensive core typing, although offensively it's great. It's absolutely great because you can Shell Smash with Blastoise, Blaziken and Sceptile are really offensive, so I mean that's good, but defensively it's just not the best. And then another thing I have wrong with this team is Dusknoir as a backup Trick Room setter. I'm assuming Gothitelle is going to be your main Trick Room setter, but you picked Dusknoir first, so I'm not really sure. But if it is going to be your primary setter, it's not the bulkiest. Although it does have base 130 defenses, if I'm not mistaken, but the HP is like 45, 40, something like that. So the bulk is a little bit, it's like not necessarily there because of the HP stat. But overall, like we said before, this is where the teams really start to show how like these are really good drafts coming up. And I actually really like this draft. So Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, this is a very solid comp all around. My biggest things with it I noticed in terms of, first off, I want to give this team compliment, similar to the last team and one of the other teams that's coming up in just a bit. I think this team is insanely well budgeted. Togetic, Silvally, and the Rhyperior and the Liepard, I think we're all a little underpointed a little bit. They're all, and Blaziken especially. Holy crap, Blaziken's a monster.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those mons all just were not given the point values they deserved. I think, especially Togetic. That mon's insane. It was an MVP for me for an entire season. And having those kind of options is good. I do think the fast mode's a little suspicious around the edges. I think the Trick Room mode's really good, and part of the reason why I wanted to place this draft higher than a few other ones is actually because if you look back at the past slides, how many of those teams beat Trick Room? Consistent Trick Room like this, very few. There's even a couple top teams that don't beat the Trick Room mode that this team has. I think it's one of the best ones that's around, and I love the support options on this team. You got the Boltund. Boltons usually support, by the way. A lot of people don't know that. It's not like a Dynamax mod. You run it with Nuzzle and you annoy people. Liepard's one of the best support mons in draft. Togetic's one of the best support mons in draft. Silvally fills a lot of good holes on this team. Dusknoir's great. Gothitel's great. I mean, this team just has a lot of excellent tools. And it's a team also that has the ability to set up a Shell Smash Blastoise, which I like. The Togetic Blastoise lead, you just Shell Smash with it. You've got a Snorlax that can actually probably get away with clicking the belly drum and then getting the replenish boosts off, which is huge. I think this is just overall very positive feelings on this team.
Yeah.
I do think it lacks a little bit of offense, which is a little odd to say maybe for some of you. But a lot of Blastoise, if they can't get the boosts off, kind of lacks in damage. The Snorlax similarly will want some kind of boosting to kind of get its damage rolling. Rhyperior is pretty strong, but it also is weak to things like Charm, Intimidate. Silvally's kind of in a similar boat to Rhyperior, and its offenses are kind of middling, because if you run a plate to change typing, guess what? You only have base 95 and whatever stat, with no life orb or anything to boost that. Right. So there's a little bit of a lacking of offense that also keeps this team down in some respects. I do think this is one of the best teams, and I wouldn't be shocked to see for a 6th place team, this one certainly has, I think, like high playoff run going all the way potential. We'll just kind of have to wait and see, because a lot of it depends on how we place these nodes.
Yep, most definitely. I agree with everything that you just said. So moving on to the Stoutlands, and this is, like I said, this is where the teams really start to get good. This one is Glastrier, Dusclops, Stakataka, Gyarados, Bronzong, Raichu, Grimmsnarl, Gmax, Scrafty, and Mawile. So Ryan, go ahead.
Best TR mode in the league, baby. Glastrier Dusclops Stakataka is insane. If you're playing this person, good luck. I hope you have a Trick Room answer, because a lot of you don't. And this team will roll you. It's just so consistent. I mean, Stakataka can set Trick Room for itself, so can Dusclops. Bronzong's a great setter as well. So he's got 3 setters and 3 things that all into absolutely terrifying. The Raichu and Scrafty were really good picks for this comp, and Gyarados Raichu is very slept on in draft. It's a very good combination. Gyarados, I think people forget how good of a Dynamax threat it was, especially back in the day. Grimmsnarl is a really good fit for this team, both offensively and defensively. It gives you both the support options, and Gmax Grimmsnarl actually seems like it could come out. And it's a good support option for both that Glastrier and the Gyarados. There are some kind of notable cons, though. First off, you actually have to get that TR set up. You're relying on that. And your offenses outside of TR are your Gyarados and your Grimmsnarl, which are all and Scrafty, which are all physical offense, which is a little scary. There's actually an over-reliance on physical offense on this draft in general. TR, similarly, Dusclops is not going to be your most reliable setter because you don't have redirection for this comp to make it do that. You don't have a Tailwind setter, and you're not that fast overall. Not having a DD... He had an DDF originally?
Yeah, he did. He had it over the Grimmsnarl, but ended up dropping it for the Grimmsnarl, so...
No!
Yeah,
okay, I'm sorry. That was a bad decision. That was straight up... That was a straight up bad decision, and DD would have been insane on this comp. I would have probably dropped Bronzong for something that was a faster Mon, and then DD. Oh my god, this team with that kind of
absolutely. Yeah, most definitely.
And it's missing the Firewater Grass core and the Dragon Fairy Steel core, which is a big issue. I honestly, the more I look at this, I don't remember, because our PRs were slightly different. Pretty sure I had the team on the prior slide above this one.
You might.
And I would stand by that if the Tricker mode wasn't so scary. I just don't see how most coaches are just... This team is really being carried by the fact that I think Glastrier, Dusclops, Stakataka is going to be an unstoppable force of nature. It's going to be really, really difficult to beat that. If you can, then you win. But you're dealing with a Mon with 145 attack and defenses that outclass goddamn Arceus.
Yeah.
So, offensive stats better than Arceus.
Yeah.
Now, it's on an ice type, but it also has Moxie boost. A lot of the time people say, oh, you just intimidate Glastrier. It's right, but -1 Glastrier is still a nuclear thermal detonator.
Absolutely.
And then you Moxie boost, and then you win. And then you also have the Alice switch stuff with the Dusclops. It's fighting weak potentially, but he can lead Dusclops Stakataka, and then either Dusclops or Stakataka can just click Trick Room, and he can even ally switch Trick Room. There's just so much mind game in that alone.
Yeah, most definitely.
This is very carried by the top of the comp. It's a little top heavy, but it's such a good top heavy draft that I really don't have any complaints. And the middle is good enough that I feel comfortable rating it where it is.
Yeah. So, dropping in DD female really hurt the Trick Room mode because Dusclops has to carry the Eviolite to maintain its bulk, so you can't run the Mental Herb, so it's just taunt bait really, and you don't have anything except for Fake Out with Raichu and Scrafty and Grimmsnarl, I guess, to try and deny that. So it's just kind of hard to get Trick Room up sometimes, and especially against if you have a good way to deny Trick Room, this team just kind of
and you don't have any reason not to just let's say you want to run your fast mode, you want to run the Gyarados Raichu, you can lead Gyarados Raichu, get some kills, and when they die, you can throw out Indeedee Glastrier, and Indeedee can take 2 hits while Glastrier kills everything else on the field for you.
Right, most definitely. And also
that's an easy way to win a game.
Yeah, definitely. And I wrote that Grimmsnarl is a great fit for this team, specifically for Glastrier, because I think running speed on Glastrier and using it out of Trick Room is actually really unexplored, and I think with Grimmsnarl, with screens, Fake Out, Thunder Wave, everything like that, I think it's actually really possible in this team, especially with all the Intimidate options he's got with the Gyarados and Scrafty, And then yeah, I just think it's I think it's possible, and it's an option definitely. But
And he has speed swap, so
right.
spoiler alert, Raichu's speed swapping last year, or Stack Attacker will happen at some point.
Yeah, and good luck with that if you don't have a fast mode to deal with that. So woohoo, yeah, this draft is fun to play against for sure.
Yeah.
So one last thing, so the fast mode is pretty good, but the issue is, if I can, like, let's say for example, if somebody denies Trick Room and they get Tailwind up, if they taunt your Trick Room user, good luck. I mean, especially if you're bringing the Trick Room options, like Glacier and Stack Attack are great and they're good defensive mons, but if you're playing against a good player and they understand what they need to do and they flowchart it and they understand that they'll be up against Dynamax, the Glastrier, or Stack Attack outside of Trick Room, it's very possible to just lose the game outright because your mons who die to a lot of max moves actually and share a lot of common weaknesses. It's just sometimes it's kind of hard if you don't get Trick Room up, and it's yeah, it makes me a little bit uneasy about this team. I mean, like I said before, the fast mode's okay, but you know, if Trick Room doesn't get up, then they struggle like quite a bit. So
yeah, I do think this team though, I mean, God, outside of like a middling fast mode, I mean, the Trick Room mode alone is just gonna be insane. And Glastrier is straight up.
Oh, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
I've seen it be the kill leader in 4 different leagues, and it's been banned in a couple I've seen that don't allow as many tier 1s, including the MDL. We banned it because we only allowed 2 tier 1s this season, and Glastrier was too strong.
Yep, absolutely.
So we'll see how it goes.
Yep. Okay, so moving on. So I'll take this one. So this is the Black City Mambas coached by LinkPichu. This is Spectrier, Clefairy, Garchomp, Excadrill, Urshifu, Rapid Strike, Gmax, Gigalith, Trevenant, regular Colossal, Avalugg, Cottony, and Wigglytuff. So I have a really, really big list of positives for this team that aren't on this. Excuse me, mostly just because of a lot of the Pokemon that Pichu is using. They are using a lot of Pokemon that I like, which includes Spectrier, Clefairy, Gigalith, Colossal, Cottony, and Wigglytuff. And I stand all of those mons. Me and Ryan are both Wigglytuff stands. I just wanted to point that out. Most definitely. So, you know, I think Clefairy is an amazing choice for redirection, and I think a lot of the Pokemon on this team love Friend Guard, especially because a lot of them are great Dynamax options, which are like, I'm talking about like the Spectrier, Garchomp, Urshifu, and Excadrill, which aren't necessarily the bulkiest mons in the world. So, and that's also one of the cons. I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but they benefit from Friend Guard by a lot because they're less bulky. So I think the Clefairy plus these mons is actually really smart. The Sand mode is actually great. Again, it's another case of you know, adding a Sand mode to benefit other mons on your draft. You know, the Garchomp benefits from it, the Excadrill benefits from it, the Colossal gets a special defense boost. I think the overall cores on this team are just really great. Another thing too is the budgeting on this team is pretty good. I think that I think the top 5 mons are all pretty expensive, but other than that, I think Pichu made a great job picking up mons who would benefit the most on this team with the least amount of points. For example, Cottony and Wigglytuff for 3 points is insane value, and I mean insane value. Cottony is busted, and Wigglytuff is great under Trick Room, and I think it's a little bit, well, okay, so it's not great obviously because it's a point, but I think it's great for 1 point.
It'd be more than that.
Yeah, I think it should be too.
Wigglytuff should be like, Wigglytuff and Cottony should both be like 4 to 7 points probably. They're better than Avalugg. We'll get there though.
Yeah, we will. Okay. The Colossal fits in well with this team. Like I said before, benefits from Sand. And then they covered the Fire, Water, Grass, and Dragon Steel Fairy cores pretty nicely, I would say. Problem is, the Dragon Steel Fairy core is like pretty frail, I would say. Like the tripling down on the Fairy type, which is cool. Problem is, they're all weak to the same things, and you don't really have a lot of great switch-ins to those, and I'm talking about like Steel types and Poison types specifically. You've got a couple of answers for the Poison types, but Steel types kind of it's really hard to handle a steel type on this team, especially because if you're switching in on a steel type move, the Pokemon you want to switch in don't really want to take damage, so that's kind of the issue there. And the Fire Water Grass core is mediocre in my eyes, I think, and mostly just because of that Trevenant. And listen, there's gonna be somebody who's gonna watch this video who also does not like Trevenant, and I just want you guys to know, I think Trevenant's a fine Pokemon. I'm not convinced that Trevenant is great on this team. And if you're trying to get like a grass Trick Room setter, I just want to advise that there are a lot of weaknesses you have to deal with, and it's not as reliable as you'd want, especially considering that's like your only Trick Room setter. I think that's right. I think that's the only Trick Room setter. And speaking of Trick Room, I think the Trick Room mode on the team is actually below average. I mean, Gigalith, Colossal is cool. Problem is they share a lot of the same weaknesses, and
Ground.
Yeah, ground, water, yeah, it's not very ideal. You don't really have a lot of switch-ins to a lot of those things anyway, so that's why it's kind of below average. And then also, I'm never one to harp on somebody else's decisions, because I feel like every decision is justified to their own person, but I don't understand the Trevenant Avalugg. I don't really understand that. I think there could have been better Pokemon to fit the comp a little bit better in those tiers, or you could have combined the points, since you are over 9 Mons, to pick up an 11-point Mon that could potentially fix the Trick Room mode, or you could have gotten a better setter or something like that. I'm just not really convinced that Avalugg and Trevenant are the best options, but I'm hoping to be proved wrong, honestly. Another big thing on the team that I noticed was, aside from the sand on Excadrill, obviously, there's like no speed control, and at least reliably. Like you could set Trick Room with Trevenant, but it's probably almost never getting it up, because of all the weaknesses, and then it's just hard to either it's just hard to set Trick Room with Trevenant, I think. And another issue I have with this team is a lot of the Pokemon they're just very straightforward on what it wants to do. Like, you look through the comp and you think, okay, Spectrier, I know what it's running. Clefairy, I know it's going to be follow me. Garchomp, it's probably going to be offensive. Excadrill, probably going to be offensive. Like, and the list goes on. I think every Pokemon on this list is pretty one-dimensional, for the most part, at least. I think there are a couple mons on here, and for the sake of Pichu, I won't say which ones, but I think that there are a lot of mons in this team that are just extremely one-dimensional. And if you look at the comp, you can pretty much tell what set's going to come against you if you have enough experience versus those mons. So, last con I have that's really important is you can't really, this team kind of sucks at denying Trick Room, I would say. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think Cottony gets taunt, maybe, but if they have redirection, it's hard to dodge that. It's hard to dodge the redirection. I mean,
I don't remember if Cottony gets taunt. Cottony has a weird moveset. Yeah. I'll look it up real quick for you.
Thank you. I don't know if it gets taunt or not, but that's like one of the only taunt users I can really see on this team. I think Spectrier gets, I know Clefairy gets it, I think. It's just hard to
yes, it does.
It does, okay, cool. So
it does get taunt. However, I should note for anyone who forgets, Whimsicott gets Tailwind, Cottony does not, which is actually one of the biggest cons of Cottony as a long haul.
Yeah, and that's it's very solid for another for the sake of Pichu, I won't say, but there's a lot of sets you can run with Cottony with Prankster that are actually really, really cool, and situationally I think it's pretty good, and I think that's great value for 2 points. I mean, the problem is that's not going to be enough to deny Trick Room like consistently, and you have a lot of offense, and I think like the offense could potentially help deny the Trick Room a little bit, if possible, but it's kind of hard without great support Pokemon, which I think this team kind of lacks, other than Clefairy, which is one-dimensional, and the Cottony, which is kind of underwhelming a little bit. So Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, this comp is carried by the top couple picks. I mean, really, Spectrier, Clefairy, Garchomp, Excadrill, or Shifu, Gigalith is what kind of sold me on the comp. Then I saw the Colossal, Cotton, Wigglytuff, and I was like, okay, so there's a couple different ways to activate Colossal I like that I'm seeing. The Cottony, I don't know why Cottony's 2 points. What are you people doing? You fixed that, Hunter. You're a mon, aren't you?
Yeah.
Wigglytuff, similarly, like, why is that a point? Wigglytuff is pretty good. And also very nice on this comp, especially because there's some, I was like, there's some Intimidate weaknesses, but Wigglytuff gets competitive. So, and actually Urshifu can crit through that, and Spectreer's ridiculous.
Yeah.
One of the biggest issues with this team you didn't talk about is just ground types, and dark types are
Right.
so good in this comp.
Yeah.
If Clefairy is not redirecting those hits, it hurts real bad. It's a little over reliant on Clefairy. However, I mean, I looked at this team and I was just like, man, that sand mode's really nice.
Very.
And I feel like it's one of those things where how you beat Trick Room with this team is you just overwhelm the Trick Room. I mean, you just lead something like Spectre or Garchomp, and you're like, okay, good luck. I'm gonna hit you with Rock Slide, Max Phantasm, and we're gonna see if you live the turn. Which is sort of how I think this team operates in general. It's just got a very nice offensive mode with some solid support from Clefairy. I do think some transactions would be good. Trevenant's a little underwhelming. It does help with the ground weakness a bit, I suppose, but I would also worry about dark types with this team, and it's not helping in that category. I think a Psychic type Trick Room setter would actually be pretty good here. The Avalugg isn't really doing a whole hell of a lot. I also think Garchomp Excadrill's weirdly a little, like, you don't need both necessarily, if that makes sense. I feel like you could probably drop Garchomp for another potential mon, but I'm not sure what's exactly available. That said, though, I mean, just wow, the offensive potential this team has is really good, and frankly, the options it has are insane. Like, yes, everything's fairly linear, but if you can get a flowchart where you're just one-hit KOing everything with Spectrier and Excadrill and Gigalith and Clefairy, you just kind of win.
Right,
and it's really difficult to stop those kind of things. I mean, you can even just, like, run Fake Tears Cottony next to Spectrier and kill the key mon and then win with what you have in the back. And that's kind of where this team shines, I think. And part of the reason why I like it as much as I do. I do think this, like, 7 through... or no, about this 6 through 4 range, I think you could convince me of any order on these, like, couple teams. I feel like they're all about the same level of threat and difficulty, and this is where I had the most trouble tiering the teams, essentially. This is where I had the most difficulty with my own list, because there's a lot going on with these 3 teams in particular, and there's a lot of really good cons and a lot of really good pros, and it just made it difficult to kind of navigate which was better than the other. So I do want to say that for the 6 through 4 coach, is that I think any of you could win any of these slots pretty interchangeably, and I wouldn't complain.
Right. I'm with you there, 100%. And I think that's something that we discussed before making the slides and everything. So it was kind of hard to tier the top a little bit more than the bottom, I think. So, anyways, moving on. Okay, so this is my team. Ryan, I'll just let you take this one because I don't.
All right, so Miami Flare, coached by Archery. We got Torn, Metagross, Prim, Regidrago, Landorus T, Arcanine, Sneasel, Tangela, Vikable. So the Firewater Grass and Dragon Series Fairy Steel are just, those are unreal. I mean, God, you got the Firewater Grass with the Prim, Arcanine, Tangela. That is just so much bulk, so much power is sitting there. You have the best Tailwind setter in the meta with Torn. Torn is extremely good, and it procs weakness policy on Metagross, cough cough. The team is very versatile. You can run a lot of different items on this team, and you can run a lot of different options and abilities. The thing that really sets, I think, 3, 2, and 1 apart from everything below it is the versatility. These teams have mons that are versatile enough to fill multiple roles in a given week in a way that a lot of the teams below them don't. Every Pokemon has options here. You can run a offensive Metagross, you can run a support Metagross, you can run it with tons of different items. Primarina is always pretty much going to be bulky offense, but I mean, good luck with Liquid Voice Hyper Voices, those are insane. Arcanine can run about 800 sets, and you have the tools for all of them. Yeah, just weakness policy procs are crazy, and that's really what Sneasel's here for. Sneasel has inner focus, so you can't flinch it. So whatever your strategy is for a given week is going to work, because you're going to have priority that can't be flinched. So Sneasel will be able to get off any weakness policy you really need in a week, unless someone does something pretty crazy. You do have some good offense in and out of your speed tiers are a little lackluster outside of Tailwind, but your team is so bulky that both in Tailwind and in TR, it's gonna be hard to kill all these mons. And if you can get TR up, or if you can get Tailwind up, or you can get some Landorus Airstream boosts, like, you're gonna be fine. So the biggest issue with this team, and frankly the reason that I was a little hesitant to put it this high, is that you literally have no TR mode. You have a Vikavolt, that's it. Vikavolt can operate in TR and Prim, and that's basically it. However, the lucky thing is that you don't need and Tangela as well. Tangela works pretty well in TR. It's actually a very solid anti-TR mon if need be. The unreliable redirection, Tangela is a great mon, however, it always has to run Eviolite, and you're going to run into issues where people run safety goggles and be able to get around your options there. And really, that Tangela is what's helping you with some of those really fast hyper offense teams and some of those hard TR teams. And if that thing goes down quickly or is just ignored because of safety goggles, you can be in a pretty rough spot quickly. Rock Slide's generally pretty solid against your team. If you can't get Tailwind up, so if Torn fails to get Tailwind up or you're matched, that's a very bad time for you. You really need to get that thing up consistently. I also wrote down support Arcanine necessity. You have really good tools here that are very versatile. However, I feel like you're gonna be running into an issue where you need to run support Arcanine more than you need to run every other set. So even though Arcanine is literally the most versatile mon on this comp, I feel like in 6 out of 7 games, that was a weird fraction, have fun with that. 6 out of 7 games, you're going to need to have Arcanine operating as a more supportive, bulky set, instead of the cooler, justified, flash fire offensive sort of sets that you see that people run a lot in draft. You just don't really have a comp that complements that. This team mostly gets by on the fact that it is insanely powerful. If Tailwind goes up and if the main core of Mons comes out and sweeps you, you kind of lose. If Sneasel has a good weakness policy proc for that week, you're in trouble. If something procs well with Sneasel, you're having a huge issue. You have to beat the Metagross Torn, which is super hard. And even though your TR mode's pretty lackluster in some ways, Vikavolt alone has 145 special attack, so even if it's not the best TR mon, it'll certainly work fine for a couple turns. So those are my thoughts. Drago was pretty budget. Everything else feels about where it should have been placed, so pretty solid budgeting. Another mon would have maybe not been bad, but that's kind of where I'm at with your team. You can talk a little bit about your account for a bit.
Sure. I mean, you pretty much cover everything. When I was going into this draft, I really wanted to prioritize either Tornadus or Celesteela. I don't know if I should be giving away my draft strategy, but it was Tornadus 1, Celesteela 2, and I was totally expecting Tornadus to be gone because I was actually pick 11, so I was almost the wheel being 12, so it was either Tornadus or Celesteela, and if I didn't get either, then I was going to go something like Dragapult or Metagross or something like that. I was thinking best mon available for me, and then I got Torn, and then Frey was the wheel, and he went Dragapult, Colossal, and so I was like, well, I get my Torn Metagross, which is a really great start to my draft. And then as I was going through my draft, a lot of really great mons fell to me, including Primarina, and then Regidrago I prioritized a little bit because I thought it's just great under Tailwind. It also helps with my Dragonsteel Fairy Core, and I just felt like it was really strong. And I also got wrecked by it like 2 weeks ago, so I know its power. And I just felt like picking it because I thought it was really budget. I think it should be a little bit higher. Personally, I think it should have been a little bit higher on the point value at least. And then Landorus fell to me, so I was like, why not? And then Arcanine fell to me, and I'm like, well, not. And I'm like, okay. So I'm looking at my top 6, right? And I'm like, yeah, I just lose to Trick Room. So the mon that I really wanted was Sneasel, and I think Sneasel brought my entire team together. And then Tangela was there, and I actually drafted Fungus and then dropped Fungus for Tangela as an upgrade as a grass Rage Powder user. I think Tangela is just a whole lot better than Fungus because it can run the Eviolite and it's just a lot bulkier. And I picked Vikavolt just to try and help with the Trick Room weakness. I thought it was a little bit, Vikavolt maybe wasn't the best pick there, but I really wanted an electric type, and I felt like Vikavolt helps with the Trick Room a little bit, and it helps with the electric type. So that's pretty much it. Do you have any other thoughts before I move on?
Nope, not really.
All right, cool. Let's move on. All right, Brisbane Beaters. Okay, now this team, this team is incredible. Okay, 100% incredible. This is Moltres Galar, in my opinion, probably one of the better mons in draft format. Got it at pick it might have been 7 or 8, so it fell 7 or 8 picks.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? He's got Rillaboom Gmax, he's got Comfey, Mamoswine, Meowstic, Lantern, Duraludon Gmax, Heatran, and Drifblim. Excuse me. So, a lot of pros, not a lot of cons. Typical for these top teams so far. Moltres Comfey, incredible. Triage makes it so that Draining Kiss pretty much goes for every other move possible. It's actually insane. Procs Weakness Policy whenever it really wants. It even goes before Fake Out, believe it or not, so that's actually crazy. Amazing niche picks across the board, and by niche picks I mean like mons that you wouldn't necessarily see but actually fit well in this comp. And then a couple of those are like Mamoswine, and I think Lantern actually fits. Covers the it's a good switch in since Raichu is gone. It's a Volt Absorb mon. I think that was probably for the Moltres, and Water Absorb is also decent too. It's just not very used very well, or not well, I mean often. And I think Meowstic is cool too. They had Liepard here, but then exchanged it for Meowstic, and I think Meowstic generally does the same things as Liepard. It's just a little bit cheaper and gets screens up. So I think that was a pretty good value trade for them. And then the Duraludon is just Duraludon's insane with Stalwart, ignoring all the redirection, and then Heatran's there, which we will get into a little bit later. And then Drifblim, I think that's an extremely nice niche pick, considering that Rillaboom can set up Grassy Seed, Grassy Terrain, while the Drifblim holds the Grassy Seed to proc Unburden to get Unburden boosted Tailwind, which is actually insanely underrated, and I think that's really, really good. And I think generally overlooked. So, like I said before, the Rillaboom Heatran Drifblim synergy, except Heatran benefits from Grassy Terrain because it lowers power of ground moves. Great support.
Just Earthquake and Bulldoze.
Yes.
Should clarify that.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes.
Max Quake still murders a Heatran.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for pointing that out. And then I think the support options are really great here with the Meowstic Comfey, and I think the Dynamax. Look, I'm having a hard time pointing out very many cons in this team. I know I put some down there, but the Dynamax options are just so powerful and so good, and they don't even really need the Dynamax either. Like, I think a lot of these like to, but don't necessarily have to. For example, Moltres can just set up a Nasty Plot and just Fiery Wrath everything. Rillaboom obviously with Grassy Glide, and then I think that the Fire, Water, Grass and Dragon Steel Fairies are probably some of the better in the league, personally. The Lantern,
yeah, I'd argue potentially the best.
Yeah, the Lantern's a little bit, here like hit or miss, but other than that, it's just great. So this con, I was kind of up in the air whether I should put this or not, but I think that this team is relatively predictable. You pretty much know what Moltres is going to do. It's just going to Fiery Wrath, it's just going to Hurricane. Now it's just whether or not it's going to be Nasty Plot or you're going to have a tech move on it. Most of the time it's going to have Protect. Rillaboom's just going to be offense, whether it's Bandit or Assault Vest. It's pretty much between that. Comfey, you know what that's doing. Mamoswine, you know what that's doing. Meowstic is a little bit versatile, but generally you know what that thing's doing. Lantern, you don't really know what that thing's doing because I don't really think it does anything particularly well except switching on water moves and electric moves. Its stats are okay, but it's generally just not that great. Duraludon's gonna be running offense for the most part. Heatran offense, and Drifblim, you know what it's gonna do too. I mean, Drifblim's a little bit versatile, but you pretty much get the idea. So going through his team, like it's pretty much pretty predictable. Problem is, we put it at 2 because it's predictable, but it's just so damn good. It is just so damn good. It's just great. One issue I have with this team is, aside from Drift Bloom getting the Unburden proc, I think the speed tiers just are average. They're not the best. They, like, if a really fast
I think
team...
that's the biggest con of this team.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly.
Yeah. And then another con that I have with this team is, you have Tailwind, which is good, right? Except you need 2 Pokemon for the reliable Tailwind setup, in my eyes. Drifblim naturally isn't really going to outspeed a lot of the things that are going to taunt you without Prankster. So you could run Mental Herb, I guess, but if you're running Mental Herb, then you can't get the Grassy Seed off, right? So generally, you're not going to be faster than a lot of things that are going to taunt you without Prankster, I guess. And I mean, obviously with Prankster, like, you're done, but you need 2 Pokemon for the reliable Tailwind setup just to get the Unburdened Tailwind, which is really reliable, but the problem is you need 2 Pokemon for it, so it's just that. I think that's a little bit of a con. And then Ryan also put down something that I wholeheartedly agree with. You lack the redirection, but specifically for the Heatran. I think Heatran is one of those Pokemon that, like Ryan said, like there's a lot of max moves like Max Quake that just wreck it. You know what I mean? So with the redirection, it kind of mitigates that a little bit. Problem is, Cobra doesn't have it. Yeah, that's basically it for me. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, so this team is actually quite similar to teams I've drafted in the past. I'm extremely familiar with a lot of these mods. These are mods I've used in my own seasons of VGC Draft League and just Doubles Draft League in general multiple times in a row. So I'm very comfortable and familiar with what he drafted, and he did it right. So there's a lot of little niche things that make this team really over the top in my eyes. So first things first, a lot of people don't know this, but in grassy terrain, Comfey's triage healing is boosted, so it can heal for 66% of a mon's HP.
Yeah.
It also has triage with Giga Drain, so it can actually proc a weakness policy on the Mamoswine or the Lantern even if it felt like it, which is kind of ridiculous. So it has pretty insane healing potential. Those top 4 mons in particular, I think, are going to come as a grouping of 4, and they're just going to win and beat some teams. The Drifblim Rillaboom's extremely consistent. Meowstic's great on this comp. We really want some sort of Prankster mon. I think Meowstic was absolutely 100% the right choice, especially because I think it supports the Duraludon really well. And I've used Heatran a lot. And I can tell you what, Heatran's one of those kind of inconsistent mons, especially for the point value. Sometimes against a team, it'll really go in and just, 4-0, easy. Other times it really struggles. You need it with redirection, though, a lot of the time for it to be very successful. However, despite that, on a comp like this, where I feel like the Moltres, Rillaboom, and Mamoswine and the Duraludon are going to be more of the main max options, having Heatran more so in the back with like a Choice Scarf, just clicking key flash cannons, clicking those heat waves, or just coming under your Tailwind and just blowing stuff up is really what it's going to be doing more of. Or if you're just doing I'm going to set Tailwind with Drifblim, you turn Rillaboom out right into Heatran and max it and kill everything on the field. That'll work too. So this comp can work with the Heatran. I just think with some redirection, it would have been a little bit more safer, essentially. However, I love this team. This team has a really nice mix of special and physical offense. It has really good support tools across the board. Its modes are really good. Everything is extremely synergistic. And it's going to be just crazy hard to stop. I'm a huge fan of this team. The only real other issue is Trick Room mode's a little lacking, I guess, but the mons are so bulky that, you can set Trick Room against it, but like, good luck killing all these mons, especially if Comfey's just clicking the heal button with priority, and if Rillaboom's killing all your mons with priority. So that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, and also Comfey can also deny Trick Room with its own Trick Room, so so I figured that because the mons were so bulky, and then a lot of the mons get priority moves like the Comfey and the Rillaboom and the Mamoswine with Ice Shard. I felt like that was I think that's decent under Trick Room. So like, I didn't really think that was a huge con, but now that you say it, I actually agree with you. Aside from Comfey, Comfey isn't necessarily a great Trick Room denier because you're just reversing Trick Room with your own Trick Room. So like, either you're reading,
it's kind of inconsistent,
right?
But it's so bulky. This kind of comp is one where a good Trick Room designer would be preferable, but as it stands, I don't think outside of the Trick Room team with the Stack Attack of last year, I don't think any other Trick Room mode like seriously threatens this team outright.
All right.
So,
all right. So that was number 2, and moving on to number 1. Wow, this theme is, oh my gosh. Okay. So, like I said before, I had a lot of trouble finding cons with this team. Destiny did an incredible job with this team. The Cinderace, the regular Cinderace, Clefable, Celesteela. Now, before I say the rest of the team, just listen to those top 3 really quick. Cinderace, Clefable, Celesteela. Oh my god, what a top 3 that is. I think that's probably, if not like the best, I think it's one of the best. 100% in the entire league. I think that is just insane. And then on top of that, he's got Rotom Wash, Slowking, Galarian Form, Porygon Z, Marowak, Salamence, and Morgrem. Go ahead, Ren.
yeah, so Clefable's the best redirection in the game, period,
Yep.
for draft anyway. Clefairy can be better on some comps. I actually think the current comp with Clefairy with like the Spectrier, Garchomp stuff, like that's a good Clefairy team. But on most teams, Clefable's going to be better because we're in a format where things can boost. And Clefable just says, no, I don't care about those boosts. You can have a +2 Colossal, +6 Speed Colossal sitting in front of Clefable, and Clefable will take like 25% and spit in your face.
Yep.
Because it just is like that. And Clefable can work as well on its own as a sweeper in other capacities, but man, unaware redirection is ridiculous, especially on a comp like this, because the Dynamax options are so good. Literally every single mod on this team except for Clefable and Morgrem are potential max options and potential max sweepers. Marowak can sweep as a Dynamax option easily. I've done it before. Meds can Moxie boost. Porygon Z next to Clefable is one of the most insanely scary leads imaginable. The Slowking, you've got a really nice Dragon Fairy Steel Core across the board. You've got the Clefable, Celesteela, Salamence, which like, oh my god.
Right.
The setup options are good. You can boost with Bulk Up Cinderace. You can boost with Steela, Meteor Beam. Porygon Z can just kill stuff. It doesn't need to boost. Mence can set itself up. I mean, the firepower is insane. The Trick Room mode is actually really good. Having Slowking and Clefable means that you have the redirection necessary to get Tailwind up consistently. And Slowking's a very consistent Trick Room setter.
Yes.
And then in the back, you have a Marowak that abuses the hell out of it quite well. Now, there's just a lot of really tiny... You wrote down tons of small synergies, and I wholeheartedly agree. There's just a lot of little stuff that works here. He doesn't have any overwhelming type weaknesses. The Cinderace and the Rotom having Levitate helps the Cinderace out. The Steela floating is good, but then you have Marowak with Lightning Rod, so you can't hit it with electric attacks. There's just so many like little things that make this thing work. The only real issues with it are the Firewater Grass core is not complete. You don't have a grass type. I don't really think that's a big deal considering how good everything else is around it, but it's something. There's no Tailwind, which would be nice. And then the speed is kind of middling on a couple of these mons without Airstream boosts. However, Cinderace and Mence can supply those, and Porygon Z with Max Strike will lower speed, which is kind of huge. I think this team is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, I think so too.
And that is, I tried to be as unbiased as I could be with these, and I really just think this team, to me, it's one of the only teams with just solid cores. It's got a solid Trick Room mode. It's not the best Trick Room mode in the league, but it's one of the best. It's got one of the best offensive modes. It's got the best redirection in the draft. It's got, I think, some of the scariest threats. It's got the best balance of physical and special offense, and it has a Prankster Mon on top of all that. Bruh, like you're just not.
Yeah, for 5 points, by the way. A Prankster Mon for 5 points.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Morgrem's tier 2 or 3 in our league, I think.
I think it's tier 3. Yeah,
I think it is, but
middle of the pack, and it's 5 points. Yeah, it's very, very good value.
Yeah, this is a pretty ridiculous draft. I'm honestly shocked he got away with what he did.
Yeah, me too. So as you guys can see, he picked Celesteela in the 3rd round, and I was just astonished that he made it that far. Because like I said before, Celesteela was number 2 in my draft next to Tornadus. I think Celesteela is just incredible. With the boosting and then the bulky typing and then the coverage it gets, I think it's just Oh my gosh, it's ridiculous. And then on top of that, he's got it next to Clefable, which doesn't care about setups in a Dynamax meta. He's got Cinderace, which is one of the more powerful Dynamax options with Libero. So, you know, every single one of its moves is Stab, which is insane, especially when all these max moves have high base power. Unfortunately, the Knuckle and Ooze, which a lot of Cinderaces like to run in certain matchups, aren't necessarily the highest, but with the Stab, it kind of makes up for it by a lot. He's got the Rotom Wash, he's got the Slowking, he's got the, oh my gosh, he's got the Porygon, Marowak, Salamence. It's just, man, like I'm just very impressed with this draft from Destiny. I think he did a fantastic job. I think, wow, I mean, you can literally put anything on this team next to Clefable and like be in a good matchup, I think.
Yeah, and it's not overly reliant on Clefable too, which is something we should emphasize. As good as Clef is, I mean, God, if he just leads something like Cinderace Meds, or he just leads Slowking Marowak, or leads Rotom Cinderace, or Morgrem, anything. Yeah, I mean, God, you're so scared.
And one of the better combos for Celesteela is actually Celesteela plus Grimmsnarl, and then he has Morgrem. So it's mini Grimmsnarl. It's not as bulky, but it does basically the same thing that Grimmsnarl wants to do. I just think that this draft is incredible. Plenty of firepower. You know, lacks the Tailwind, but it's okay. Because you're going to be Airstream boosting with either Cinderace or Celesteela or Salamence, which is, oh my god, I just realized 3 ways to Airstream boost. That's insane.
Yeah, and Porygon Z lowering speed by
right,
1.
Yeah, with Max Strike, so yeah. Well, this team is the best, and it was unanimous between both of us. We both thought that it was the best.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, do you have any other?
By a pretty wide margin.
Yeah.
You can argue with me on a lot of these placements, and I'll maybe nod my head and go, yeah, sure, whatever. But yeah, compared to all the other drafts, I definitely would put Destiny in first again in a heartbeat with what he has. It's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree. So, this has been the power rankings, the use of the TLDR. So, in case you don't want to listen to every single pick and you just want to listen to yourself, here are the actual rankings. So, from top to bottom, it goes Destiny 1, Bidoof 2, myself, Archery 3, LinkPichu 4, HuskyPenguin 5, Otto 6, AliceSabrina 7, OCFrey 8, 9 is Blitz, 10 is P-Rex, 11 is NixC89, and 12 is Donut 852. All the timestamps for each individual power ranking will be in the description, so if you want to go back and listen to any specific one, they'll be there. I just want to give a huge thank you to Ryan. It's actually kind of late, and this is a longer video than we plan on recording. So
it's okay.
Yeah, I just want to.
No one's yelled at me yet.
So I just want to give you a big thank you for helping me out with this again. It was very nice, and I hope everybody else can take what we have and kind of consider it, or at least have some thought on it. So, is there anything else you want to say?
Nope. Thanks for having me on. I actually am on that Discord. I'm Piano Guy 27. And I'm there, I guess, in theory. If you have any questions, feel free to DM me or at me. I'll try to respond in the next day or so. But I will be watching the season passively as an observer. I'm currently a mod for another VGC league, and I'm playing one right now. And another thing is starting preseason stuff, so I'm pretty busy with draft stuff at the moment, so I'm really not focusing too much. I won't have like a lot of time to respond to this stuff, but I will set aside the next 24, 48 hours if anyone has any questions or wants to talk to me about anything. So
yeah, well, thanks for that, and thank you again. It was fun, and that's pretty much all we got. So if you guys enjoyed, please like and subscribe to this video. I'll leave Ryan's link in the description too if you guys want to go check out his MDL content.
Oh god.
Listen,
those fucking shit, bro.
Ryan has great music taste, and if you watch his videos, it's very great background noise. I have to say, it's very great.
My last video, I looped Pollyanna like 40 times because I didn't have time to find anything else to put on the playlist, and I was like, I guess I'm fucked.
It was great. It was absolutely great. Well, like I said before, please like and subscribe if you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned for more Draft League content, and it's been Archery and Ryan. Thank you guys for watching, and have a good night.